We are in a very dark place. A 75-year-old man gets stabbed 15 times, including in the liver, the neck and the abdomen, and potentially loses an eye for writing a book. Another author, the most successful writer of fiction since Charles Dickens and Agatha Christie, J.K. Rowling, gets told on social media that she's next. And she's used to that, having hired 24/7 security after pointing out the difference between a biological male and a biological female, one which any GCSE biology textbook will confirm with diagrams. Tom, have you got any diagrams? There you go. That's the Willy on the right, the Willy Winkle. He's a boy. And the lady garden on the left. That'll be a female. How did I only get a C in biology? Robbed. Meanwhile, the supposedly liberal arts festival, the Edinburgh Fringe, which has made stars of Peter Kay, Sarah Millican, Michael McIntyre and Frank Skinner, cancels a legendary Scottish comedian because of his problematic material. Here is the eye-wateringly hypocritical statement from the Pleasance Theatre, who are behaving like the modern-day Gestapo. They said the Pleasance is a venue that champions freedom of speech. That's right, champions freedom of speech, and we don't censor comedians. They go on to say, whilst we acknowledge that the comedian Jerry Sadowitz has often been controversial, the material presented at his first show is not acceptable and does not align with our values. On what planet is cancelling a show not censorship? They went on to say, in today's society, opinions such as those displayed on stage by Sadowitz are not acceptable. It surprises me that I have to explain to the management of this world-renowned comedy venue, who happen to be friends of mine, that the things comedians say on stage are not opinions, they're not views, they're jokes. And this decision to cancel the run of the wonderfully outrageous comedian Jerry Sadowitz is the ultimate joke. But it just reflects the hellish double standards of the cultural establishment. Jerry Sadowitz effectively plays a character of the most outrageous comedian who says unthinkable things. It's even how his show is marketed. The show's called Not For Everyone, and he advises you to have a drink before you go in, such is the amoral, nihilistic vitriol you'll be subjected to. He verbally vomits on the audience for an hour. That's the act. Free speech and indeed artistic expression are not safe in the hands of festivals like the Fringe, or indeed event organisers like Nika Burns, who heads up the prestigious Edinburgh Comedy Awards, who said in 2019, "I'm looking forward to comedy's future in the woke world." Well, if shows like Mock the Week and The MASH Report are anything to go by, it has no future at all. Both shows were recently cancelled due to crumbling ratings. Live at the Apollo will be next. When left unchecked, this toxic, narrow-minded, bullying, divisive ideology, previously known as extreme political correctness, or PC, will see books, comedy, music and art banished if it doesn't fit the prescribed narrative, follow the correct politics and adhere to this hellish new scripture, which, by the way, changes daily, as we saw with Gary Lineker a couple of weeks ago over the women's football bra joke. The woke crocodile will always, eventually, devour its own. These smug censors think that they're doing the right thing, but what they're actually doing is on the same spectrum as that appalling knifeman at the Salman Rushdie events. Not on anywhere near the same scale, I will grant you, but each in their own way is an attack on Western values. And the double standards of woke censors knows no bounds. Apparently, Jerry Sadowitz is a problematic comedian. But no doubt they'll be happily hosting Jimmy Carr with his jokes about the murder of millions of gypsies. And what about Frankie Boyle and his side-splitting routines about children with Down syndrome having shit haircuts, Katie Price being assaulted by her heavily disabled son? Or what about his recent comedic fantasy of raping TV host Holly Willoughby? Let me be clear, I am a free speech absolutist, and Boyle and Carr's jokes are just that. They might be sick jokes, but they're jokes nonetheless. They don't mean the things that they're saying. They're pushing boundaries. That's what comedians do, and long may that continue. Carr and Boyle are geniuses, as is Sadowitz, which is why it's got to be a level playing field. And frankly, any art worth its salt is problematic. If your book, your song or your joke is problematic, it means you're doing it right. Think of the violence and brutality in Shakespeare's plays, the naughty sex of D.H. Lawrence, the blasphemy of Life of Brian, the drug message in the Beatles songs. And rap and hip-hop are about as problematic as it gets, and I love it. And comedy, as the ultimate bellwether of free speech, is really just the art of saying things out loud that you're not supposed to say. Who did the Taliban go after first when they recaptured Afghanistan? It was popular comedian Nazir Mohammed, who had his throat cut, the price he paid for his satire. Let me cite the genius Victoria Wood, who said in terms of offensiveness and comedy, if it's offensive, it's not funny. If it's funny, it's not offensive. She's so right. Which is why the audience must decide. If Jerry Sadowitz's show was truly horrific, everyone would have walked out. On the occasion of his first controversial show, it was just a handful of illiberal woke types, too fragile to handle the rough and tumble of deliciously inappropriate, wildly offensive comedy. This insidious cancel culture is the thin end of the wedge, which has, in its logical extreme, the horrors that we saw meted out to Salman Rushdie in New York on Friday. And by trashing freedom of expression on our own shores, we vacate the moral high grounds and make it harder to stand up to political extremists who seek the destruction of all Western values. The only way that we defend this pincer movement against Western values, for which a generation of mainly young men gave their lives in 2 world wars, is to once again fight. That's right, we've got to fight. Illiberal toxic ideologies are all on the same spectrum. We defeated them in the past, most notably in the 20th century with communism and fascism, and we must defeat them again. Cancel culture, as with all tyrannies, is dressed up as being for the common good. That's because censors always seem to have a reason for what they're doing, but in a free country, never an excuse.